Ed, good morning.
Oh, good morning, Alexander. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope the weather's beautiful in Seattle, but I've been out there a couple of times. I know sometimes it's a little rainy.
Today it is spectacular.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, heck yeah. Let's enjoy our Saturday, but I'm super excited to have you on. I love talking to people like you who have stories that are just among those you're not going to hear in regular daily life. So, how about you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to over the last little bit, and then we'll get back to the start of the career and how this all kind of got going.
Yeah. About me. So I worked in disaster response, Alexander, for 30 years, mostly with FEMA, but I also spent some time overseas with NATO.
Mm,
And I worked all the big disasters. I worked 9/11. I worked Katrina. I worked the Superstorm Sandy. I worked the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf.
mm.
I worked the Columbine school shooting. I've worked on tribal reservations and remote islands and in Europe and just about every state in the country. So did that for 30 years and then wrapped up my federal career in 2016. And then I started a second career as first a consultant and then a speaker and now an author. And
Mm,
so I've written a book about my adventures working with FEMA.
mm. Now, most people, when they hear about disasters, they're like, "I want to get away from disaster, not the classic run towards disaster." So, how did that idea to get into this field begin? I guess I realize that there are people who have to respond in disaster, but
Sure.
my mind goes to firefighters, ambulance, EMTs, military personnel, the control of the scene. I guess I've never really thought too hard about, well, who's the person who's kind of like pulling the strings, conducting how this thing happens?
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to to explain FEMA's role, which are really in the broad sense what we call the career of emergency manager. It's a coordination role, and it's the emergency managers, whether at the federal, state, local, or tribal level, are not the ones who going out and doing the life-saving response. They're not digging through the rubble. They're not putting band-aids on the bleeding, but they're coordinating all the different agencies and organizations. They're tapping in all the resources that may be available. They're leveraging all the expertise, and they're trying to bring together that family of responders together, so there's no duplication effort. We're all working on one page and pushing together to meet the needs as a result of the disaster. That's the role. It's a sort of a we call it a coordinator role. You can call it a orchestrating it, pulling the different strings. But yeah, that's what I ended up doing for about 30 years. But it's interesting you mentioned that life saving first response element, because that's what I did initially. I was on the ski patrol,
I was
and
gonna ask how you got started in
yeah,
this.
that's how I got started. So I was on the ski patrol up in the mountains in California. I did that for 6 years, and so I went on search missions for missing kids, and uh, rushed to the scene when someone broke their leg or fell off a chairlift or cut their head and all that. So that's how I got involved. Love the medical side, love the medical stuff, love being part of that environment. Um, but I need to make some money. So the federal career in bridge management paid a little bit better than being a volunteer for the ski patrol.
Mm. So you were just volunteering, but you probably had a pretty long season at that point in time
I
in
did.
the
So
California
yes,
mountains.
so I was on the National Ski Patrol as a volunteer. That you got at the time. That was back in the '80s. I think you got $2.50 for lunch, and you got two free tickets. So for your girlfriend, your wife, or if you had
Uh,
kids, whatever. So
or both of them, yeah.
are both your girlfriend and your wife. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
ticket for each of them. And
Yeah.
then, um, but I would, gosh, I would sometimes do 100 days a year on the mountain, and then we'd do training during the summer. We'd practice chairlift evacuation, so we'd review and get recertified on all our medical skills. So it was volunteer, but it was a pretty big commitment. Um, but I loved it. Gosh, I love the atmosphere. I love being part of it. And you just sort of have those moments where you go, "This is my cause. This is what I want to do with my life.
Mm.
So how can I do this and also make enough money to live?"
Now, were you on a mountain that had avalanches? Was that part of what you had to deal with?
we didn't. I'd never dealt with an avalanche, but we would do training on avalanches, both just your situational awareness and assessing whether there's potential for it, and then if one happened, how do you conduct a search and rescue operation?
Now, this may be a dumb question, but are there certain regions that have a lot of avalanches because of the temperature changes, or can an avalanche kind of happen anywhere? Does it make a difference if the mountain's steeper or taller?
It can. So yeah, those are all factors. So yeah, a steeper mountain is, and areas that tend to have more higher snowpack, are at higher risk, and then it's that temperature change where you may get soft snow on top of hard snow or hard surface, and then it cracks. So you see them. You don't see them as much in California. Tahoe area, we see them. You have them in Utah. I see them a lot in the Alps in Europe, Canada. You tend to see it's more in those steeper south-facing peaks.
Do you know this author, Shane Parrish?
I don't.
Yeah, he's great, but I don't want to spoil his book, but he wrote a book very recently, and it's sort of about how, just amongst other things, it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. But he tells the story. He was on like a national ski team as a kid, and him and his friends would routinely go to like the back of the mountain, which was like the hard part of the mountain. And one day they went on a first run, and it was kind of a pain in the butt because they would have to hitch a ride from a car and then ride all the way back and then kind of go up the chairlift and then be able to go back down. And it was 3 of them, and they went for the first run, and they're all jacked up. And he said, for whatever reason, I wasn't feeling like going. So he said, I'll tell you what, I'll just stay at the bottom of the mountain here. I'll wait for you guys, and then I'll give you the car ride back home. So his 2 friends went, and it turned out it was avalanche conditions. And unfortunately, both of his friends ended up getting caught in an avalanche and dying.
Wow.
And it was just like, obviously incredibly difficult for him to understand, like, what's the meaning of this? Like, why was I so lucky? And to this day, he goes, I don't even know why I decided not to go, because any other day I would just keep going with them. But it kind of was part of his story, in that there's a lot of random events out there that make it incredibly hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. And he talks about stock market and banking and crisis and chaos into the future. And he's like, that little decision that at the time meant nothing to me, ended up meaning everything to my friends.
What's the name of the book? Say what a book? What's his name again? Shane
Parrish, I believe is his name.
Parrish. Gosh, hey, thanks, Alexander. I'll look him up.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one.
And those themes of life and career and really resonate with me. It's just those small decisions, those small moments make a difference. You learn about who you are. You see how action can cause consequences, or lack of action can make things worse. It's just it's something I'm obsessively thinking about all the time.
I apologize. I'm going to correct myself. It's Morgan Housel is the author. They both released the book in a similar time frame. Morgan Housel, and the book is Guide to the Things That Never Change.
Love it. Okay.
Both very great authors. I would recommend Shane Parrish regardless.
Oh, I haven't crossed out his name.
All right. Well, he's good. The book he wrote is Clear Thinking. So that's a lot about just how to make better decisions, how some of the mental models out there, some great investors have produced and thought through, are going to help us make better decisions. But so you make this transition after being in the ski world, deciding you need to make a little bit of real money. Where do you go next?
So I was on the ski patrol, and then I was living in San Francisco, and I was trying to figure out my life, my career, and where I was going to go. And I discovered that there's this little unknown, relatively small agency called FEMA. This was back in 1989. No one had heard of FEMA in 1989.
Was it a
And
smaller agency at the time? Did it
it
have
was
less government funding?
it was a lot smaller than it is now, and it was FEMA was created in 1979, so it was only 10 years old in 1989, and the preceding decade since it was created was relatively quiet time for disasters. It's not like we see now with big disasters every year happening over and over again.
Why do you
Uh,
think that is, that we're having more disasters? Maybe not
um,
to interrupt, but
no, yeah, no. Well, that was a great question. We think about that all the time. So, I say there's a number of factors. I think we're seeing massive population growth and building in high risk areas, uh, and areas that are prone to hurricanes in the wildland urban interface. Building homes in the mountains. So we're building homes along floodplains and rivers and all that. I think we're just also in a normal historical cycle. You know, uh, severe rainfall, flooding, hurricanes, all those sort of climate events tend to be real cyclical over decades and centuries. And I think we're just in a peak cycle. And then I think the third factor is we're probably beginning to see the impacts of climate change in terms of higher temperatures for extended period of time, the warming of waters where hurricanes form and get their strength from. So I think that that's the third factor.
Yeah,
So
I had heard kind of what you said, that we're building very close to water. We're building right on lakes, and like Miami is a perfect example. Like Miami is becoming so expensive that the people who historically lived in Miami, like the Haitians and Cubans and Bahamians, they now can't live there because instead they have like a 40-story high rise. And then when you hear these stats about, oh, this is a $10 billion storm in terms of damage, that number seems like unbelievable. And you go, well, how much did the storms do back in, the 70s? Oh, they did $1 million in damage. Oh my God, the storms are so much worse. But it's like, well, yeah, there was no Trump Tower like right on Miami Beach in 1970. So it's kind of one of those things where the statistics might lie to you a little bit. But also we live in a social media world, so we can like see someone with a phone recording this terrible tsunami and we go, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable.
Right. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, Alexander. I think, we're just, we like to build homes and buildings in nice areas, right? Where it's super pretty and you got ocean breezes and spectacular blue waters, and you got the beach and all that. And so some of the most beautiful areas in our country are also the areas that are high risk for disasters.
Yeah.
And so, the big ones I think we worry about, floods are the ones we deal with the most. Hurricanes, we seem to be getting a lot of them, more and more the last decade. And then wildfires are increasing, and we don't even have a fire season anymore. It's all year round. Our fire season is all year round. But a lot of building in the mountains and all that, high risk areas. And then the big one that fortunately we haven't dealt with it in the U.S. for a long time, but we're probably due is an earthquake.
That's one of the reasons why I love Ohio, man. No earthquakes, no tsunamis, no hurricanes,
just flooding.
We get, even flooding is pretty rare. Not to say it can't happen, but I don't ever remember a serious flood. There's very, very few tornadoes. That's very rare.
You don't get the tornadoes as much there, do you?
Almost no mudslides.
Right.
We get like thunderstorms, and that's about it. We also no dangerous snakes, no dangerous spiders. It's pretty safe place. We like it out here.
Yeah.
Some people might call that boring. I don't know.
Right. Oh yeah, I don't know. How about blizzards?
Honestly, not as bad as when I was a kid. This is probably anecdotal evidence, but I do not remember anything serious over the last 10 years. When I was a kid, I remember we would get snow days at school, and there would be like snow sometimes piled 6-8 feet high, mostly from plows, not like 6 to 8 feet of actual snow. You're going to get that maybe in like Buffalo or northern Michigan, maybe in Lake Erie off the lake. But we would get, 12 inches of snow, maybe 2 feet of snow, and that was pretty serious. But man, it feels like the last decade we haven't had anything near that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, that's a good message. So you're looking for a more resilient, disaster-free future. Check out Ohio.
Yep. Pretty safe out here.
Okay. Well, yeah, we should market that state motto to the tourism folks.
Yeah. They definitely are pushing to grow Ohio. And my city, Columbus, is one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. Bank of America said that Columbus was the fastest growing city in 2023, faster than Austin, Texas, and faster than Miami, Florida.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've been to Columbus. I won some contest, and I went to the Ohio State Michigan game.
Oh, man.
Columbus. I know, it was just a classic. Unfortunately, Michigan won that year, but it was still great atmosphere.
Well, that probably had to be a while ago, because Michigan's beat us twice now. But then I think we had like almost a 15-year streak where we won.
It was during your super long streak. Yeah. Michigan had a hell of a year last year, I tell you. Woof.
Yeah, they're tough. All right, so back to disaster response. Where do you begin? Like, where's your first? Are they giving you training, or are they just sending you out? Hey, kid, there's a disaster. Go see what you can do.
Yeah, kind of the same thing. So, I joined, and actually, the first disaster right after I joined was Shady Grove, Ohio.
Oh,
yep. There was a little flood there, and I was driving from California to report into Washington, D.C., which is going to be my base for 2 years. And I drove through the floodwaters. But what really got me into it, Alexander, what really just sealed the deal for me, about 3 months in, we had a massive hurricane hit called Hurricane Hugo, and came across the U.S. Virgin Islands, and they kept going straight, slammed into Puerto Rico, took a jog to the north, and then took a dramatic left turn to the coast of the United States and slammed in Charleston, South Carolina, and then kept going up north, made its turn in North Carolina. So we had Puerto Rico, we had USVI, we had South Carolina, North Carolina. It was all hands on deck. And
when you say all hands on deck, what does that fundamentally mean? You're sending the Army, the Coast Guard, like the Army Reserves?
It means that this is within FEMA. FEMA talk within the FEMA world. It's that, okay, we got, we're going to need everybody on this one. This is our number one priority as an agency. Everyone's going to be engaged, involved to somewhat, maybe in a deployment, disaster side, or offsite support in some aid. So drop what you're doing and focus on this. And so they were rounded up staff for Puerto Rico. And so I said, man, I'll go. And then they go, oh, man, you're just a trainee. You don't know anything. You haven't really been through official training yet. But, well, we're desperate, so we'll send you. So,
yeah, pass out water bottles, kid.
Yeah, water bottles. Collect pencils, pick up the trash in the office. Don't be a burden, and just find a way to be useful. And so I ended up going to Puerto Rico. And the idea was to send me down there for a month, and I ended up staying 4 months. I ended up staying so long that the management training program I was in threatened to kick me out if I didn't come back. But I loved it. And I just go, okay, the disaster response side of FEMA is the side of FEMA I want to be in. That's the program area. I want to be on the front end. I want to be on the ground in the field when something happens. That was my thing. And that's what I discovered working that first disaster. I want to be in the community.
So what fundamentally does it look like being in the field? Are you setting up like a tent and living out of that? Like, how does this look?
No, typically we'll stay. I mean, I've slept in my car for a few days. I slept in tents on occasion. I've busted out hotel rooms, but typically we'll find I've stayed in building on military bases. Typically we'll stay in hotels, but it varies. But the front end for us is going in there, establishing our coordination points with the tribes, with the local community, with the state or the territorial government, um, bringing in all the other federal agencies and resources that we'll need, and then identifying what the life-saving and life-sustaining needs are first, and then identifying what the initial recovery needs are next. So, do we need to bring in water? Do we need to bring in search and rescue teams? Do we need to bring in medical teams? Do we need to bring in some sort of temporary housing accommodations? Do we need to kickstart some grant funds to help people get back on their feet? And then our job is to make that happen and
So
pay for it.
sounds like there's a bit of a right now, middle term, long term. How do we work
That's
this thing
exactly
back?
right, Alexander. Yeah. So the way you look at a disaster is at the front end is life saving. What do you need to do to save lives? That's always priority one. And so that's like search and rescue, medical attention, stop the bleeding.
Mm.
And then the next thing you're going to look at is life sustaining. Okay, now that we've rescued people, how do we keep them alive? So that you may be looking at food and water, power restoration, sheltering, emergency generators for hospitals. That's life sustaining activities.
Mm.
And then the third thing you're going to phase 3 that you're going to start looking at is initial recovery. Maybe getting debris removed, so construction crews can get in there and start repair work. Maybe get some small grant money flowing to people so they can do things on their own, buy clothes, begin to fix up their home so they can get back into it. So that's how you look at life-saving, life-sustaining, initial recovery.
While we're sort of on the topic, I know this is something that I was reading. It sounded like you maybe taught a course in or class in, but talk to me maybe about preparation, because you're coming in after the storm hits or after the event hits, right? But talk to people out there about how you could mentally or physically prepare for something before it happens, because I have to imagine that is going to set a lot of people apart from
It is
managing and not managing.
Yeah, so you're talking in terms of public preparedness, individual family preparedness. It's huge, and it's a tough sell, because you think, gosh, you watch it on TV and you just can't imagine that it's going to happen to you, right?
Well, also the preppers kind of have a bad rap for some reason. Like, that's a weird thing that
It is a weird thing.
being prepared is like silly. I think it's because people believe that they're overly prepared, and you've sort of like dedicated your life to this. But I guess I'll use an example from my life. Like, I just started training martial arts, right? You're in some way, shape, or form, you're preparing for a fight. Why would people go, well, that's crazy, you're never going to get into a fight? And you're like, I certainly hope I don't ever have to defend myself. But amongst other reasons why I am doing this is to be prepared in the case of it. I don't think anybody would think of it like that. That's so weird that you're doing that. They'd be like, all right, that's cool, whatever. You know, if it gives you peace of mind and exercise and makes you happy, healthy, sure, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I think I like what you're saying, and that's kind of I think the federal government need to relook at their messaging and how they present the idea of preparedness. I like the way you're saying it, and I think sometimes we overload people, telling them, we ask them to spend thousands of dollars, and we give them like 100 things they need to do. I tell people, hey, just take pictures of some of your insurance documents and your driver's license on your phone, right? Just have that in your phone. Insurance, maybe, your driver's license number or vehicle registration, just that basic stuff, so you have that on your phone. Just be situationally aware, right? I live in Seattle, right? I'm on the Cascadia Fault. Mount Rainier is right over there. That could blow up. We could have fault. We have tsunami. I just pay attention, and then, when I'm in a different community, I'm fascinated by disasters and their history and all that. I just practice situational awareness in my life. And just like you, in your self-defense preparation, if you're walking into a hotel lobby or restaurant, where are the exits, just you can begin it's kind of fun, to become more aware of your surroundings and just practice that. So that's the second thing I encourage people to do. And the third thing is, just think about your family, either your parents or your kids, or just how are you guys all going to meet and stay in touch, right? How are you going to reconnect? And
that's a good one. That takes 2 or 3 texts to.
Yeah, are you going to do
out.
it by text? Are you going to have a couple meeting sites? Are you going to have an out-of-state person like grandma that everyone's going to check in with? Just sort of voice plan. It could be a school shooting, or it could be a flood or an earthquake or whatever, or you just get separated at the mall, whatever. But you have sort of that check-in plan to reconnect. And so, those are just 3 simple tips that I think people could do that they'd probably end up using a lot in just their regular life.
And none of the things you just said are go out and buy something.
Right. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars. Don't worry about changing your food. I mean, if you want to go that far, go do it. Have the water, have the food, canned food, build the bunker, whatever. Go. God bless you. Go for it. You're going to be in good shape. But there's also little things you can do at virtually no cost that are going to give you peace of mind. It's going to help you and your family, and you're going to end up using that more than you think.
Are there any first line of defense items that you would suggest people have in their home, their car?
Yeah. So I would have a basic first aid kit. I would have water.
Just like bottled water, or like a water filter that you can.
I would have bottled water. Okay. I would just have bottled water, and I would have some bottled water available. I would think about, if you have a big earthquake or something, the power goes out, fill up the bathtub real quick if you can.
Interesting. Okay.
But have water.
That's smart.
And so that first line, if you're going to buy stuff, a water, first aid kit, flashlights, extra batteries, maybe some couple cans of tuna fish if you like tuna fish, or whatever your canned food of choice is, Spam, tuna fish, whatever. So if you're just some basic stuff like that, to have those supplies in hand, go for it, do it. It helps.
I mean, shoot, you can probably buy a kit on Amazon for $40 or $50 right now.
You can. Everything, and that's a good point. There's a lot of people who sell the basic home preparedness, home disaster preparedness kit. Yeah, Amazon's a good source for that. Yep.
Yeah, and that's a
great idea.
It's gonna have more than nothing. So that's the one you just hit on that really scares me, is if all the electricity goes out.
Sure.
Like for a long period of time. We've become adapt to living with electricity that I think that people would start to go crazy about hour 24.
I don't know if they will, and they have. Have you looked at Beryl down in
I've
Texas?
been just reading only what's like on the top of the news, not a lot.
A lot of people are focused on that storm. It was a Category 5, quickest Category 5 we've ever seen in the Atlantic. But it ended up hitting Texas as a 1, Category 1. But a Category 1 storm, don't worry about the category, focus on storm. There were widespread power outages. It and in sweltering heat. And it was such a challenge getting the power restored that hospitals were releasing patients because they didn't feel comfortable about letting them go home with no air conditioning, no power. So they're keeping in the hospitals, and the hospitals fortunately have a generator power backup, so they were able to keep functioning. But I was quoted on CNN once, Jeannie Meserve. I was talking to her. We were down in New Orleans in 2007, Hurricane Gustav, and she goes, "This disaster seems to just keep getting worse." And I said, "Yeah, the longer the power is out, the worse the disaster gets." And you're talking day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, right? your food's all going bad. It's
Yeah.
filtering heat. You can't get the water on. Your cell phone's dead. It's tough. It's tough. Those the power restoration is something that a lot of people underestimate, but that can really set your life back.
Well, you can't buy anything anymore, even if their store's open, because there's no debit card swipe ability.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like you said, refrigerator goes out. You don't have a pantry that has some non-perishable foods.
hmm
Most people are not accustomed to not eating for 24 hours
Yeah,
in the United States anymore.
you're so right. Yeah, that's and we're also we are we're gosh just we're just really dependent on the power infrastructure, the power grid. But probably in more ways that we think about, right? Like just our cell phones. How dependent are we on this
Oh,
device?
people don't know how to get from point A to point B. I count myself in that,
Me too.
I'm
Yeah.
going to a friend's house. Where do they live? I don't know. Like, give me their address. Like, I'll get there. Like, I'll just plug it into the GPS and I'll be there.
Right.
What are disasters that scare you? Are there disasters that
Yeah.
maybe that haven't happened or they've happened in small microcosms? Because a big power outage, widespread, that freaks me out. Like if somehow there was either a fault in the grid or there was an attack on the grid, we hear things about that. Are there things that, based on your experience, really scare you?
Sure. I would say number one for me is the big earthquake. The last major earthquake we had in the United States was the Northridge earthquake in 1994. So that was 30 years ago. That was a generation ago.
Mm.
So not only as a nation have we not really thought through and dealt with a big earthquake for a long time, our first response community hasn't dealt with a big earthquake. It's a whole different ball game. It's no notice, right? It's not like a hurricane. You're not getting 7 days warning that this thing's coming. It's just there it is. And we have fortunately the geological community, our scientific and academic community have really done some fantastic research in identifying our faults. So we have a better idea of our risk levels. But the challenge is now we've discovered we have much more areas that are at high risk than we thought before. So we have, obviously got California, right? You got San Andreas, you got the faults in Southern California. And then, Utah, Salt Lake City, they have one that historically goes about every 400 years.
Mm.
And it's been about 400 years. A lot of people don't realize that there's a big fault there. You have what's called the New Madrid Fault that goes from northern Arkansas to southern Illinois. It runs through 8 states. And their last big one was in 1803, and it was magnitude 8.1, 8.2, which is a monster earthquake.
Top 10? Is 10 the top?
I guess it could go beyond 10. That's a good question. I don't know.
That's what about the storms, that they have a new categorization now. They have a 6. Is that right?
Yeah, they're talking about it. I think they're still officially 5, which is 150 sustained wind speeds of 155 up is category 5. But I have heard talk that they're looking at start to identify category 6 type hurricane storm.
So am I safe from earthquakes out in Ohio, or is there a chance?
Sure, every state in the nation is vulnerable and has historically had earthquakes. I don't think you're at you don't have the frequency. I don't think you have the serious faults that they're concerned. I think again, Ohio is. And you really got me thinking about how safe Ohio really is. Yeah, yeah. There you go. I think I think earthquakes would not keep me awake at night if I lived in Ohio. But be aware that they could happen.
You said that you live pretty close to Mount Rainier.
Yeah, I can. It was a little bit cloudy today, but if I look this way to my south, it's right beyond downtown. Yeah, I can see it sometimes.
So I read this article by Krakauer about the lahar. Do you know about this? I'm sure you probably know about this. I had never even heard of a lahar previous to this, but it's this odd, like instant melting of the glacial, or not glacial, but the mountain ice, and it creates this enormous like mudslide. Apparently, it ran at enormously high speeds, like 50 miles out from the mountain, Um, and in like the 1980s, it like decimated a whole town. Uh, you probably know more about this than I do.
Wait, yeah, I think that sounds like you're talking about Mount St. Helens.
Maybe possibly.
Mount St. Helens, which is um, just north of Portland, and that was
It might be that
yep.
area.
And not, I mean, that's far. That's just a little further south, and that's exactly what happened. The top blew off, and then everything came down, and then you had ash spread from north of Portland through Seattle all the way to Minneapolis, just massive deep ash, and yeah, this is Mount Rainier's active, so yeah, I'd be looking out my window someday, and the top could blow off of it.
Here,
And then,
I want to freak you out, but I'm reading an article written in
but you
2020.
said
June
Krakauer, huh?
24. Yeah. I'm not.
Okay,
You
yeah.
can
I
find
read
it.
a lot of his stuff.
It
I will look
was-
him up.
Yeah, it's a collection of stories, and I found that one in it. Why Mount Rainier is the U.S. volcano that troubles scientists the most.
Yep.
Mount Rainier keeps me up at night because it poses such a great threat to surrounding communities, Tacoma and South Seattle, built on 100-foot thick ancient mud flows from eruptions of Mount Rainier, says Jess Phoenix, a volcanologist. Sleeping Giant's destructive potential lies not with fiery flows of lava, which in the event of eruption would unlikely to extend more than a few miles. Majority of the volcanic ash would dissipate. Instead, many scientists fear the prospect of a lahar, a swiftly moving slurry of water and volcanic rock originating from ice or snowy, rapidly melted rock by an eruption that picks up debris as it flows through valleys and drainage channels. Yep. So sorry to freak you out there, man, but
yeah.
just
Well,
head away from Mount Rainier.
no, I don't know. I think you're a lot like me. Because you practice self-defense, you practice self-awareness, and it's tell me if I'm off track here, but it's not like we want something bad to happen, right? But but we're ready to be tested, right? We're ready to use our skills, um, we're not afraid of these situations, we have that confidence because we know our stuff. And I think to a certain extent, we want to live our lives where we're willing to show up and be engaged.
Certainly.
If
I throw myself into the fire quite constantly. I had a buddy who this was a couple years ago. It was fortunately not a big situation, but he ended up walking home one night from a bar. He was kind of like drunk, and he walked like way too far, like a mile and a half. And Columbus is pretty safe, but any town you walk into the wrong area, you can get your feelings hurt. And someone like popped out from a bridge with a gun, kind of held him up and was like, "Give me your wallet." And he just like pulled his wallet out, gave it to him. Guy took it, walked away. And then he gets back to the house that night. While we're all telling him how stupid he was for doing that, a couple of guys go, "Well, why didn't you take the gun from him?" And he's like, "You guys are stupid. Shut up. Like, you would not. Oh, I would have taken the gun. I would have fought him." And then I certainly didn't say that, but you do kind of wonder, like, well, what would I do in that situation? And you don't know until you're there. There's no way to know how you're going to react until you get into that situation. Will I clam up? Will I faint? Will I just give my wallet away? Will I try to react and do something?
Yeah. How will I gauge? How am I going to be decisive in a decisive moment? And I don't know. Yeah, I'm like you. And to some extent, I kind of want to be tested, right? I want to learn how I'm going to do that, and I do visualize and think through situations, how I react, how I want to be someone that people can count on, how I want to be confident in myself. But yeah, no, that's a good story. But I do see that the big egos and the overconfidence, and I'm cautious about that.
Certainly.
But I want to be someone, been like this my whole life, who's not afraid to be tested, right? Yeah.
Speaking of that, maybe give me your impression of this situation that happened in Texas, where the shooter was inside the school and the cops didn't react. I don't know a ton of the details. I'm sure you know them far better than I do.
Right.
But I believe that a couple of police officers just got charged recently with like failure to act of some nature.
Right. Yeah. Ovida and down in Texas, it's tragic. Um, yeah, I'm a little cautious because I wasn't there and I haven't looked at it too deeply. But what you're saying is exactly right. You know, the charged allegations has been that they were overly cautious. Now, the last thing you need to do is get more people killed, right? Rushing
Mm-hmm.
in.
Right.
But the allegation is, they could have prevented a lot of deaths if they had been more proactive and more courageous, and and that they didn't have good situational awareness. They had multiple agencies responding. There wasn't good coordination. They hadn't really thought through that this could happen and drilled and worked together.
Mm.
And to me, that's unacceptable. Um, how is it, um, what 25 years? What is Columbine? 1998.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
said that that was something that you
and
reacted to.
I was there. I was in Columbine, and and we've seen a lot of school shootings. And how our communities not sort of thinking through. And the first, thinking responders thinking, how are we going to react? How are we going to coordinate with fire, police, other organizations, different jurisdictions that are responding? What's going to be our game plan, and how am I personally going to seize that moment? What am I going to do in that moment? And so yeah, that one's been frustrating for a lot of people.
What
And
what was
and
it
then
like,
some of the
what was it like being at Columbine?
well, Columbine was really personal for me because I at the time I was living about a mile, about 5 miles or so from the high school campus,
Oh, wow.
and I was living in Denver, and so we had employees who had kids in the school when that happened, and uh, and so I told my boss, we're all watching it, listening to it. I go, I'm going down there, and I'm just going to go check in and just be a federal liaison for them and see, just stand by in case there's anything that they might need that we could help with at the federal level. So I went on down there and checked into their command post and and worked with them. So what that what Columbine did for me as an emergency manager, Alexander, is it just got me really involved in school safety,
Mm.
not just for school shootings, but the whole thing is school safety, whether it's a school shooting or a tornado or a flood or um, uh, and if you think about it, and if you look at disasters, and you can watch this if you say disasters, one of the ways we as a society measure an impact of a disaster is what are the impacts on kids and schools.
Yeah.
And then one of the ways we measure whether community is bouncing back and whether families are the kids going back to school and have the schools reopen. Schools are really important symbolic measurement of a disaster's impact and a community's recovery.
Well, I mean, we
Eh,
saw that from COVID when kids can't go
there
to
you go.
school, that's not like a one-year issue, that's a lifetime issue because those
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
lifetime issue,
they're missing
and
important moments of their learning.
and you're so right. I got to remember that. I like what you just said because yeah, one of as we look back on COVID, right? What are we talking most about? We're talking probably about the impact it's had on kids, right?
Mhm.
Missing school and staying at home, and those lack of social interactions, and we're about did we overreact with the school closings? And we need to talk about this stuff because but it just shows, when we look at disasters, oftentimes you measure it as what's the impact on schools, what's the impact on kids, and which I think is kind of reflects well on our us as a country because we look at these disasters and then but we look at them the impact on our emergent generation, which I think is a good thing.
So, you've had the, um, opportunity, but the also unfortunate reality to be on the front lines of a lot of these, terrible disasters. How do you kinda make, like, mental amends with that you're rushing into the fire when you know there's going to be, like, an incredible amount of loss in a situation like that? Like Columbine, right away, like, "This is gonna be terrible, but I need to go. I need to stay cool." I need to be the most logical person in the room, I think, in this situation.
Yeah, well, so I did two things that really helped me. Um, it, and you really hit on a good point. I talk to responders about this all the time. When you work in this business, you really don't know and understand how much of yourself you're giving to
Mm,
work in this business. Now, but I'm not gonna lie, the insider humor, the camaraderie, the friendships, the bonds that are built when you work in this business it's like being on a professional sports team. I mean, it is so intense, so
mm,
bonding, and so powerful and that's a very good positive thing. I mean, you love the people you work with and you trust them with everything, but to deal with that, to balance that, um, first off, you have to be in this business for the right reason, right?
mm.
You have to be. It's not like you're wishing for disaster. I write about this in my book, but you are kind of wishing for disaster. It's You're not wishing for anything bad happen, but you're wishing for that chance to be tested and do your job. You're wishing for a chance to help people. You have to be in this with that sort of positive outlook, fearless approach, that you're not afraid when something happens. You're excited. If that makes sense, you're excited chance to do your thing,
You are not
right?
the first person that I've heard say that. I had a firefighter on, and he made a joke about, like, being a firefighter in New York City, and I'm like, "Oh, is that, like, the nightmare being a firefighter in New York City?" He's like, "Well, depends how you think about it. For some people, it's the dream because
Yeah,
every day there's gonna be some really intense situation where they get to
you're
test their skills."
you get a tense situation, a chance to test your skill and discover who you are, a chance to be part of history, right? So the people who do well and survive this business, first of all, they have that mentality. They have that frame. And then the second thing is you have a you come home. You come home from the event. You put the operation behind you. You reconnect with your family. You focus on your time with your kids, your family. Um, you turn off, that clip ice incident command system language, speak. You're operational. And so you got to learn how to shut it off and back away, and you got to come home.
Mm,
You got to come home before you show up again. And then maybe it's part of that come home is like having a great hobby, like writing books or painting or playing the guitar, or maybe having a spiritual part, or go to church or whatever. Um, Maybe it's just you're into exercise. You have an exercise routine, physical fitness, but something to balance
mm.
that life. So yeah, so it's always, you go to the operation, you give it your all, you love it, you love to be a part of it, but then to do it well, you have to be able to come home and turn it off. And the people who can't do that tend to burn out pretty quick or get sort of bitter and negative. Um,
I was gonna ask if you see, like, a personality type, because I would think if you're, like, very, very, maybe not emotional, but you don't wanna see a puppy get hurt, or, you hate it when somebody gets injured. I imagine
yeah.
it's very difficult to kind of hang it up and go do your painting hobby on the side. Do those people either not get into the business or burn out?
Um, no, they get into the business, but empathy is good, but you just can't. You got to be realistic.
Mm,
You can't solve all the world's problems. You're not going to get everyone back in their home in a week. Um, and some people are going to recover better than others. And some communities are going to recover better than others. And so to you got to be honest about it. You got to do, and you got to keep a little distance. I mean, you care, you fall in love with these communities, you want to help them, um, but you just can't get so stuck on this. I got to fix this problem. Some problems you're just not going to be able to fix. You do what you can, right? But you recognize the limits of your potential to help.
Well, I think that's also a lesson in leadership, that you have to care for each individual person, but you cannot prioritize that individual person above the needs of the group, right? So, like, this is obviously a different example, but if someone is constantly late for work, but I'm like, I really care about this person. We're trying to help them out. We're trying to get them out of the mud they're living in. If you just prioritize that person, then everyone else goes, well, this isn't fair. They're not giving me the opportunity to be late, or they're lowering the standard at which we operate. So the way that I've heard it, and what I really like to think about it, is all leadership is just balancing kind of on the edge. Like, you have to be like caring and lenient, but if you're so lenient and caring, it's not helpful. You have to care about each individual person, but you cannot prioritize the team over each individual person. It sounds like that's sort of what you're hitting on. That if you care so much about the Rodriguez family, that you miss the bigger picture of, hey, we need to like care about everyone in this group of people. It might
Yeah,
be hard to do your job.
it is. It would be hard. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you're absolutely right. Um, there's we call it, what do we call in the business, the catastrophizers. It's actually scientific, a middle term. People who that refuse to see any sort of in disaster recovery. The milestones are sometimes really small and insignificant. When you live with a disaster day after day, week after week, month after month, sometimes year after year, it's hard to see you're making any progress.
Mm.
And the people do real well. And this is the same with an exercise or any sort of uh, uh, art or skill that you're trying to develop, is recognizing small milestones on the way, that
Mm.
positive reinforcement. And people who do that are the people I gravitate to. Those are people I want to work with. But the people who are just constantly stuck in negative, in being negative, constantly stuck in that, always trying to find another problem, another barrier, another challenge that's preventing them from achieving success. That gets kind of exhausting for me.
I imagine that would be very, very easy in disaster management to be like, "Well, this is all bad." Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm an optimist, and I've met people who've lost their homes, their community's been underwater, and they've described themselves as an optimist. Rudy Giuliani during 9/11, and a lot of people forget that he was, because now he's such a confusing character and a totally different guy, a strange guy now. But 9/11, he was incredible, Alexander. I was there. He was incredible. Leadership and everything else, and not afraid of the moment. And someone goes, well, God, how are you dealing with all this stuff? He goes, I'm an optimist. This is a great city, great country. We're going to come back from this. This is not going to knock us down forever. I'm an optimist. And that's what working disasters and being with a leader like that is just, boy, that's special. That is special.
Well, at some capacity, also tell me about this. Can these disasters actually bring people tighter and closer together?
They do. Now, look back to COVID, March 2020, right? When the whole world was shutting down, just like all of a sudden, oh my gosh, this country's shutting down. We're shutting down this schools. But remember that we were all scared. Oh my God, there's going to be mass riots and panic in the street. But no, what happened? Everyone came together. People were taking care of their kids. My sister was going shopping for my mom because my mom was, sort of a high risk to, a transmissional virus like COVID. Just at the family level, neighborhood level, people were sitting on their balconies playing music, saying hi to their neighbors, come together. You see that a lot in disasters. You see that a lot of times people fear disasters because they think we're going to see people at the worst. Almost 100%, you're going to see people at their best, especially the front end.
Well, this is maybe it's a famous book. You've probably read this one, Tribe by Sebastian Junger.
Oh
And
yeah,
he talks
yeah,
about the English people during the, I think the Blitzkrieg is what it was. They're getting just bombed just constantly by the Germans in World War II. And interestingly, people in like mental institution, people who were having trouble coping with life, they were able to come out and they were like, hey, we have jobs for you. And then all of the people who were like hunkered down in the subways, they, after getting out and getting through it, kind of reported it was the best time of their lives because they're like, we were all in it together. We had a purpose. We had a mission. We had camaraderie. We all had a singular viewpoint on life. We got to get through this. We got to beat the Germans. We got to survive. And it was a terrible situation, but people afterwards were like, that was, you hate to say it was great because people are dying around you, but they enjoyed it and they longed for like that sense of camaraderie that we're all doing this thing together.
yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, that is so true. Yeah, it's not like you're saying I missed the war,
Right.
but I miss that. Oh my God, that unity of effort, right? And that one page coming together, common cause. That's a really powerful thing, and you see that. You see that. I think the reason, one of the reasons that happened there in Great Britain, because they had great leadership, right? They had Winston Churchill, that was able really to, through his words and his style, his optimism, his enthusiasm, um, really gave that an anchor. And a lot of people describe Churchill in those moments as the happiest he's ever been in his life, right?
Mm.
And he was like a kid, and he was so excited. So, and that's, at first it's sort of counterintuitive. Oh my God, how can you be happy when people are dying and your country's getting bombed by the Germans and threat of invasion? You're on your last legs, and but it makes sense. You talk to the firefighter, talking to me, it just, that sort of attitude, optimism, enthusiasm, passion, excitement for that moment, is what really separates great leaders from poor leaders in a crisis.
Well, in every movie or hero story you watch, the hero's with the girl and she goes, don't go. You don't have to leave because he's going to go off into this dangerous situation. And the hero never goes, yeah, you know what? You're right. I'll just stay here. I'll just stay with you. He always goes, right? Because we know that's the story. Like the hero has to thrust himself into danger because that's how they become the hero. No one ever became a hero sitting on their couch, right? You have to, like, at some capacity, handle the situation that is difficult. So from the perspective of Winston Churchill, like, this is his moment. This is my moment, man.
That was a moment. He was in his 64, 65 when he got that moment. He experienced a ton of failure in his life up to that time, and but that was his moment, and he was just waiting for that. And I call it the show up moment. We in every person's life we have a gift of show up moments, or a couple show up moments in our life, and if you have a core value that when that happens, I'm going to show up. I may not know what I'm going to do. I may not know exactly how I'm going to respond, but I'm going to at least show up. I'm not going to just sit on my couch and watch it on TV and talk on the phone. I'm going to be on scene, whether it's a family situation, a work situation, a disaster community, whatever. I'm going to show up and engage.
That's interesting because, like we talked about previously, you never know exactly how you will react. But you just said, have that core value that I'm going to try to show up.
I'm going to just show up. I'm going to show up and do my best. Yep.
Interesting. What was 9/11 like?
9/11 was a really privileged, honor to be part of it. Amazing, a terrorism attack, and killed 1,800 people. So I was working on wildfire in New York, or wildfire in Utah, when the planes hit the Twin Towers. I got a call from FEMA headquarters, and they go, "Hey, would you come out? We're going to deploy all the federal search and rescue teams from our country. It's going to be a massive effort." And they go, would you get out here and run media operations, press operations at Ground Zero in New York for all the search and rescue efforts?"
Mm.
And I go, I love to be that assignment. I love to be part of that. Absolutely. And I go, "Well, how did I get there?" And they go, "Hey, you're always bragging that you're a show up guy. That's why we called you. You got to figure it out." So we,
obviously no planes
no
moving
planes
anywhere.
flying, right? Remember, Alexander, no planes. So
FEMA doesn't come in with the helicopter and get you over there.
you could get a helicopter. So
Maybe if you were president, they'd
maybe a president.
get the helicopter.
We didn't have it. We were based in Denver. We didn't have an Air Force One or anything. But what we did do, which is pretty creative. So okay, Monday Night Football. Planes hit Tuesday. Monday, there's a Monday Night Football game in Denver, where I was. New York Giants, Denver Broncos. And so that was Monday night. Team flew home, but the owner stayed in Denver, right? The owner of the New York Giants stayed in Denver. And so planes hit Tuesday. Then Tuesday afternoon, he called our office and said, "Hey, I really need to get back to New York. I got a bunch of NFL officials here. Is there a way you can get me clearance to fly?" And we say, "Hey, it just so happens we got Ed Conley here, and he's got his public affairs team. He's got a mission, and so if you give him 5 seats on the plane on your private jet, we'll get you FAA clearance to fly.
Hey,
we'll designate your plane an emergency relief flight." So I flew back with the owner of the New York Giants.
Who was that at the time?
That was Robert Titch. Okay. And so he was co-owners with the Mayer family, Lowe's Hotel. And he's passed away. But actually, when I wrote my book, I tell the story of my book. And I sent a copy of my book to his son. I got a really nice note because his dad was so great to us. So I flew back with him and some NFL officials. And so we got there right away. We were like the first people from out of the area to get in. We got there Wednesday. Planes at Tuesday, we got there Wednesday. And I'd never been in New York before. So that was my first experience.
Welcome to the big city.
And I'll tell you what, you talk about community coming together. We would drive down or take a golf cart down. We lived at the Javits Center. That was the staging area for search and rescue, all the search and rescue teams. You'd take a golf cart down or a little car down. The whole avenue down to the World Trade Center complex was packed with people, signs, and they would give you food and water. They just stuff it in your windows. And if you're wearing a FEMA jacket and you try to take a taxi, they would refuse to let you pay. You go in a restaurant to grab a sandwich, everyone in the restaurant or bar would try to buy you food. It was unbelievable. Just the spirit and appreciation and just they're the kindest people in the world. It's so incredibly kind and supportive of everyone coming to help. It was really special. Be part of that, and the leadership from the city of New York and their emergency management office, and their leadership from their fire department in New York, police, EMS. I mean, just amazing people at the response level, at the leadership level, at the community level, and just the people of the city. It was something that I'm just so glad I was there and had part of that history.
How long were you there?
I was there a couple months.
Yeah, I imagine that process, just like you talked about, like getting back to some sense of normalcy.
That's when I come home from New York. Funny thing is that it was really hard for me to talk about. Not that I had like a mental barrier. People would ask you like, "Well, how was it?" I mean, what do you say? Really bad or anything. So I'd always go, "Well, it was just." It was really people in New York were really impressed me how they handled and responded to that event. They weren't scared. They didn't panic.
Well, that's a tough group of people, those New Yorkers up there.
They're tough.
Yeah. Is that the worst, most intense disaster that you ever saw or were a part of?
But one of them, I would say the one that kind of was the hardest for me was I'd worked the Haiti earthquake in 2010, and it
Mhm.
killed like 230,000 people.
Oh my gosh.
And and I was at the embassy. I was working a lot with the search and rescue teams at the U.S. Embassy, and then the United States government were bringing in orphans in, because there's just finding kids on the street, right? You're
Mhm.
just finding kids on the street. They're moving bodies with bulldozers,
Mm.
because they're picking up all the concrete. And there's bodies just falling out.
This may
A
be a
month
really dumb question, but how do most people die in an earthquake? Buildings falling on them?
collapse structure.
That's
Yeah,
so
it's
scary because you can't do anything, you know?
yeah, and they had all they don't have the best building standards there. They use
Right.
unreinforced, it's concrete, unreinforced masonry. It's just sort of stacked together,
I
and then
see.
you have the shaking and
And
everything
it
falls
just
down.
slides down, yeah.
Yeah, falls on top of you. So yeah, a month in, you're finding a family of 5 kids. The oldest is 12. Living in their parents are dead, and they're living in their busted up remnants of their home.
Gosh.
It was really sad, really tough. And
Well, also the infrastructure in Haiti is not there. It's a very poor country. It's one of the
very
poorer
poor.
countries in the world, yeah.
Yep, a very poor country, really weak infrastructure to begin with, and then they actually have. And then you had, I don't know, like it happened at that time of day when everyone was at work. So you had like 50, 60%, the whole government complex collapsed, and you had like all their senior leadership, and they had some really young, um, smart people working in government before that earthquake. They were all killed.
Gosh.
So you really had the whole leadership of the country was decapitated and out of commission. So you had everything. The thing that pisses me off and really bums me out the most about Haiti is I thought when I was there, I go, okay, this is gonna be an opportunity for this country, right? It
Mm.
To deal with their gang problem, it's a beautiful country, beautiful beaches and everything else. It's a Caribbean island. Maybe to develop tourism. The people are nice. They just need more safety, security. I really thought it was going to be a real moment. All the world's attention, all the money, billions of dollars flowing in from around the world, all the charitable foundations. Sean Penn's out there, and they got the Hollywood's doing their musical
Mm.
tribute to raise.
Mhm.
I go, okay, this is going to be a moment. If everyone could work together, right? UN, United States, all the nonprofit work together, and really, this might be the moment for Haiti to, really fix this country. And it never happened. It's worse now than it was before the earthquake.
Yeah, didn't
And
they just have, like, a military coup recently?
yeah, and they got gangs out of control, and it's just, yeah, it just. So I don't know. It was. That's what bothers me the most when that Haiti is just a missed opportunity. You work there when you're there. People would grab you, um, and say, "You guys aren't leaving us, right? You're going to stay here." They want to be part of the United States. You're not leaving us, right? You're going to help us. No, we're only here temporarily. We're just, short-term humanitarian relief, and then we're out. Yeah, don't leave, don't leave. This is safest the country's ever been right now with all you here. But yeah, it's real.
Mm,
It's a tough
that's
one.
tough. Have you ever been part of, disaster responses that you didn't feel, went as well as it could have? I saw
Yeah,
you were part of
Katrina.
Hurricane Katrina. I was gonna ask, and I was pretty young when this all happened,
Hmm.
but what I remember was that people were not as pleased with FEMA as maybe other
Oh
disasters.
no, yeah, it was. There's some T-shirts for years in the French Quarter with, you know, the F in FEMA didn't stand for federal. There was another F word when it
Mm,
came with yeah, yeah, it was, um, so it was tough disaster. It was a total collapse of the national emergency management system. There are failures at all level. Massive failure. Why the hell did you evacuate the city, right? And that's a local and state responsibility. That's not a federal responsibility. You had 7 days to get ready for a hurricane. You couldn't evacuate people.
They didn't
What the hell?
evacuate at all?
It was just self-evacuation, and then they didn't issue any mandatory orders. They didn't issue any. They lost all their buses. They were all flooded. They sent people to the Superdome as a shelter of last resort. There was no food. There's no water. There's no power. There's no toilets. It was a total failure at the local level, total failure at the state level, and a total failure at the federal level by FEMA.
Sounds like there was a lot of issues before the disaster even started.
Yeah, a lack of preparedness, a lack of taking the storm seriously, overestimating their ability to deal with it. And really, a lot of people forget about Katrina. Two things people forget about Katrina. One is that Katrina also hit Mississippi. And it hit Mississippi just the hell as hard as it hit Louisiana. But you don't really hear about Mississippi as a failure because Mississippi was a success. You had a stronger state, local, and federal team in place, better preparedness, and the response went much smoother and lower death toll. So a lot of people forget that, it wasn't really that we didn't have enough resources, that we didn't have, our laws weren't good enough, that our policy, our planning, and our playbook wasn't good enough. It was that our leadership wasn't good enough. And that's my takeaway anyway, because when I go, well, Mississippi went well, and they had the same resources, the same playbook, they just had better leaders, right? So that's one takeaway. But the other takeaway from Katrina is that you gotta, if you have a way to get people out of harm's way before the disaster strikes, you got to do it, right? You can't just dilly-dally around. You can't do it. And you can't only look at the category of a hurricane. You got to assess your vulnerability to in other areas, right? That in the damage from Katrina in Louisiana was not by wind, it was by flooding due to when the levees broke. It was really a flood event. It wasn't a hurricane event. It was a flood event when the levees broke.
And they're quite a bit below sea level to begin with.
They are below sea level. Have you ever been there?
No, I've never been. I've heard it's a wild town.
It's a great place. Oh my God, it's a great city. I was back there. I spent like 5 years there after Katrina. I was Katrina, and then I was there for Gustav, and then I was there for the oil spill, and then I was there for Hurricane Isaac. It's a great place. But I was there so long, I joined a local ultimate frisbee team and we played a park. And so you're playing on these football fields, right? And you're running around, and then this ship comes passing by you, above you. It's on the Mississippi River, which is above the city, and it's built by these levees and protects barriers. That gives you a real sense of it's below sea level. When you got a ship, you're playing on this football field, the ship's passing by. It's above you.
So tell me about the book that you wrote.
Sure.
You have it sitting right behind you.
I got it.
Promote the Dog Sitter.
I just designed this bookshelf last night.
Looks great.
So does it a prominent display off
it
my
is prominent. Looks beautiful.
left shoulder.
So the book is Promote the Dog Sitter. It's kind of your lessons in leadership through crisis management.
It is. It's a leadership book, Alexander. And so I'm not the hero of the story. So I talk a lot about my failures, my miscues, but more than anything, I talk about my experiences working disasters and great leaders that I saw. And I'm not talking about presidents, agency directors. I'm talking about ordinary people who rose to the moment. I'm talking about people from local governments and tribes and states who stepped up to the plate. I'm also talking about people like Giuliani and mayors who, rose to the moment. But it's a look at 10 core values, 10 principles that I think anyone can use, regardless of what industry they work in, to deal with crisis situations. If you want to become more fearless, more decisive, if you want to do the right thing in a really chaotic situation, here are 10 principles for you to consider.
What is the difference between everyday leadership and leadership in a crisis?
I think in a leadership in crisis, you've got to be more decisive with less information. You got to be right or wrong, perfect or not. You got to make the best decision you can with maybe only knowing about 50% of what's going on, and about really understand the consequences. That you don't have time to process, run a focus group, do peer review. You got to make the damn call. And that's crisis leadership.
Now,
and the way to do that, in my mind, is, well, first of all, you can be well grounded in the history of disasters. Got to be well grounded in, the laws, the resources available, how the system works. You got to know all that junk. But you also have to have a set of core values. You got to have a set of really deep beliefs. Whether it's people first, or I'm going to tell people the good, bad, and the ugly, no matter what. I'm not going to get caught up in the political game. I'm not going to be the type of person who blames other people publicly. Whatever. A set of core values to steer you and guide you. So when you have to make decisions, you have something inside you can rely on. So you don't hesitate.
Yeah. But how do you think about trying to make that correct decision? I'll give you kind of just two examples. It sounded like you thought that in the aftermath of 9/11, the leadership was pretty good, pretty solid. Decisions that were similarly made in New York about COVID, where now it's highly publicized, they made a lot of incorrect decisions. They sent elderly people back into nursing homes that became breeding grounds and killed a lot of people, and heavy use of ventilators, which clearly we know at this point was not the right decision, because it actually inadvertently killed a lot of people. Understandably, both people and groups of people who made those decisions had limited amounts of information. Was that bad luck? Was that chance? Was that some errors in judgment and thinking? How do you think about those snap decisions that work and don't work?
Yeah, well, I subscribe to the Theodore Roosevelt quote, the best decision to make in a crisis is the right one. The second best decision to make in a crisis is the wrong one. And the absolute worst decision to make in a crisis is no decision. So I always give first of all credit. At least you made the damn decision, right? At least you tried something. Now, my problem with New York, and that it's not the frontline workers, it's not the medical people, it's at the political leadership level, at the state level primarily. But my problem is that I think they looked at a lot of stuff from the political. It wasn't about a people first decision making. It was political. How are we going to make our numbers look good? How are we going to be the hero of the story? I think they just had I think they made a lot of decisions based on ego.
So you would say that maybe their guiding principle wasn't what's going to be best for everyone in the long term. It was more so what's going to look good in the next little bit.
Yeah, I think they wanted to do good. I think they wanted to help as much people. But I do think their guiding principle was, how do we look good? I don't think that, I think they're definitely focused on people and want to help people. I wouldn't throw them under the bus there, but I do think that there's a lot of ego there, and I do think that they were focused on, how do we be the hero? How do we be the hero?
Isn't that counterintuitive, right? You want to look good, so you make a decision, and then it ends up being the one single decision that makes you look as bad as possible.
It happens more than you think. Yeah. If you don't have a core value to help guide you through this, and you're worried more about your press clippings than the results of your action, then it can happen.
Yeah, we just did our ownership reviews. I get reviewed by the rest of my staff. I kind of give them a chance to give me feedback, and I don't act like I've got it all figured out. I'm totally 100% the best owner you've ever had. And, you know, kudos to them when they do and are willing to give me negative feedback or things that I can work on. But I was sitting down with my HR director, and we were going through it. And one of the questions is like, will Alex bend on his ideas? And some people said, yeah. Some people said sometimes. Some people said no. And I said, I think I'm willing to bend on my ideas, but there are certain things I am not willing to bend on. One of which is our mission, our motto, our core values of our company. So my hat, I don't know if you can see it, but it says build relationships and deliver results. Like those are things that I'm not going to bend on. I'm not going to bend on building a relationship with my colleagues. I'm not going to bend on doing things that deliver results for our clients. Now, if that is frustrating for you that I'm not willing to bend on those things, then hey, I understand. But those are our kind of North Star guiding principles that direct us to how we're going to make decisions, that we will not go, yeah, well, it's okay. You don't have to do this thing. It's going to be better. It's going to build more relationship with the client and deliver a result, but you don't have to do it.
See, I love it. I love it. You know, you got your line in the sand, and every leader needs to have their line in the sand. And yeah, there's, you know, there are things I want feedback on. There are things I bear my ego on. There's things that I want to be better at. And there are things that I will not compromise on. This is, you know, so I love it. I love what you're saying. And that's, it's, you know, most people in leadership positions, if it wasn't just given to them as a gift, they worked hard to achieve it. I think have that, whether they realize it or not, whether they've written it down, but they do have a set of core values that they act on. You do.
Yeah, we try to. We're not perfect. I'm not going to say that we always align ourselves 100% with them, but we try our best.
I think just to have them, so it's something. Every time you make a decision, every time you're looking at a new client, every time looking at relationships, every time you're talking to your employees, at least it's something to bounce it off of, right? Is it, you got a foundation that, you know, you're just not built on sand. You know, you're built on a foundation of core values.
Yeah, and I kind of want to hear about your 10 proven principles, but I'll just quickly say a story. We have a client that we just onboarded, and we made a minor mistake. It wasn't a big mistake. It was literally one word in a listing, and someone bought the product and left a negative review. And my brand rep, who I was working with on it, she goes, well, what do you want me to say to them about this? Because they kind of mentioned, hey, we got a negative review. It sounds like they were mistaken on what they were going to get. It was a coffee. They were going to get a whole bean or a ground. And they got the one that they didn't order. And she's like, I don't think they understand that we like had the word wrong. And I was like, thought about it for a second. I was like, just tell them we made a mistake. And she's like, I don't think we're going to have to. And I'm like, tell them we're going to make the mistake. Not because I'm proud that we've made the mistake, but I said, actually, I think it's going to build more trust in our relationship, that we're willing to tell you when we made a mistake. Now, if we make mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, then it's going to be like, wait, hold on a minute. These guys may not know what they're doing. But I think the same thing is true with dealing with your employees, with your staff, with the people that you know. It's like sharing a little bit of that vulnerability. I think so many people they want to appear so perfect that they're never willing to be like, yeah, we made a mistake. And that was on us. I'm going to raise my hand. Wasn't my best effort, but like, got it. I'm going to work on fixing that. And I think that's one of my primary core values that I could have easily been like, tell them it was like customer error, which we easily could have done. But I thought about it and I went, truthfulness isn't one of my core values. It's important, obviously, but that relationship building is one of the core values that I kind of stand by. Build the relationship.
It comes back to you. I think most people don't expect either other people or organizations to be perfect, but they do expect them to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think you'll take away your lesson. Then I see that in disasters. I've seen situations where we've screwed up and we were the first ones to tell people, right? We didn't get it exposed by the press, by the media. We told people as soon as we
Mhm.
discovered it, and we apologized and we meant it, and we said, "Here's what we're going to do to fix it," and we did, and we followed up on what we said.
Mm.
God damn, that gave us a lot of credibility,
Mm.
almost more credibility than if we had done everything right.
But I think people totally view it the wrong way. They view, and there you see these in some of your leaders out there. I mean, shoot, both of our presidential candidates, I don't want to get political, but they both are only telling you the things that they did right and how good everything was and it was
Yeah,
perfect. And
right.
they're both, it's hilarious because you like watch the debate, which was just ridiculous, but they're both telling you, I had the best economy in American history. It's like, you both can't have had the best economy. Like one of you's right. Like it's just not possible you both had the best economy.
Well, it's I think, and I think about this a lot. I think everything you and I are saying, the way you structure your company, your values for your organization, the values that I talk about in my book, that I talk about and think about a lot. I just don't know if it's applicable to the political world. I think that's a whole different. I think that maybe it does. I don't know, but that's a whole different thing.
I think that it's easier to get bounced out of politics by like one whatever dumb thing you said or did in some capacity, but I think that's also changing. I mean, gosh,
I
but
hope so.
both candidates are they've done so many crazy things that like clearly we're all looking past. So maybe
Right.
I'm wrong. Maybe, if you
You're
admit
wrong.
like that was the old joke, like these presidential candidates got bounced out for the most minor of reasons. What was his name? Dean something. He did a yeah.
Oh
He did
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. The
And
yell. Yeah,
yeah.
Dean. Howard Dean, was it Howard Dean?
Scream that doomed Howard Dean. Yeah.
Howard Dean, yeah.
He just had like an awkward yell and people were like, this guy can't be president. Now, like both of our candidates are just like wild.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe changed a little bit.
I hope so. But yeah, but I'm thinking I actually have to write. I should write something for my book that just a warning that if you're running for political office, this book may not help you. But if you want to be a leader in crisis, this is not a bad way to go. Yeah, but running for office, yeah, you got to be. I guess you just, even though I think personally, someone who's vulnerable, admitted mistakes, what they learned from it, yeah, screwed up, man. I would like it.
Unfortunately, I think that you give like ammo to the political opposition. It's
yeah.
This guy's a flip flopper, and I'm like, that's a good thing. Like if you get new information, you're willing to change your opinion.
Change your mind, man.
That's a great thing. Like
nothing wrong with changing your mind. Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell talks and writes about that, and because people go, hey, you're a little inconsistent in your book. Yeah, well, I changed my mind about halfway through. I thought I've got new information. I just changed my perspective on it.
You're under no obligation to be the same person today as you will be tomorrow.
Roger that.
So maybe hit me with some of these 10 proven principles, and then we can kind of work our way out.
Okay, so yeah, so I got 10. Show up, which we've already talked about. Be an optimist. My chapter 3 is called Think in Threes. A lot of people like that chapter.
Think in threes, like number 3.
Think in threes. The challenge in crisis is you're looking at, what are my priorities? What I'm going to do first? What am I doing? And so I teach the idea of just thinking in threes, just breaking down, 3 priorities, 3 things you're going to do. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just pick any 3. Like when we got to New York at 9/11, and we're looking, what the hell are we going to do first? I said, we're going to go to the Javits Center. We're going to check in with the search and rescue teams. We're going to make contact with our counterparts in Mayor Giuliani's office, and we're going to find a hotel to sleep. Excuse me, to sleep for the next couple weeks. And so I just picked 3 priorities. We did them, and then we picked 3 more. So that's thinking threes. It's just organization. It's a way to organize yourself in crisis.
One of our core values is prioritize and execute. It's kind of just that. Like when you don't know what to do, just like, okay, what are our top couple priorities? All right, let's go knock them out.
Yeah, and I teach 3. That's pick 3. It's and then number 4, I talk about own it, which is what you're talking about. Owning a failure, owning your mistake, and the idea of owning it in a crisis, and 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 uh, and what happens when you have a bunch of owners crisis, as opposed to
Mhm.
people who blame and hide. And then number 5 is my promote the dog sitter, and
Yeah,
that
tell us that story.
yes, that story. So that's the title of the chapter, and the idea of it is that you never know who's going to emerge in a crisis, and you have to surround yourselves with risk takers and people who know only about 50% of the plan actually is going to make sense in a crisis. You got to be nimble and flexible to flush out the rest, right? So
Mm.
9/11, we're in New York. We're at the Javits Center with search and rescue teams. Our mission's to handle the media and all the celebrities that wanted to meet the search and rescue teams and the firefighters and everyone digging in the rubble. We managed all that. And the number one area of interest uh, from all the people we're working with, the reporters, the movie stars, and everyone else who's calling us, politicians from around the country, around the world, was the search dogs. That was the number one area of interest. People all across the world fell in love with the search dogs that were going out in that rubble. We were overwhelmed by calls,
Mm.
totally overwhelmed. Thousands and thousands of phone calls. So our obvious solution, and we had, everyone was running around talking, to the handlers and trying to get pictures, trying to answer all these questions. And it was just, we had to recognize the teams are there to do a mission. They could only give us so much of their time. We couldn't be a burden on them. But at the same time, we couldn't miss this opportunity to educate, right? The world, what was going on. So the obvious answer was, well, we give this job to one person. We let him be the search dog expert for 9/11. And so we picked this guy named Doug Welty. And are you a football fan?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I always tell the story that if we had staffed 9/11 like an NFL draft, you know, Doug Welty would have been like a Brock Purdy. He would have been like the last pick in the draft. He was not a guy that, superstar before the thing and totally overlooked and underestimated. But we drafted him, we brought him on team, gave him the chance, gave him the assignment, and he just hit it out of the park. He just
Mhm.
was awesome. And so he just embraced this assignment with all his heart and soul and energy. Never slept, always had his phone on, learned everything he could about the dogs, their handlers, their breeding, their background, their mission, what they do. Um, and he taught the whole world about the search dogs in 9/11.
Mm.
And I just think there are 4 things that happened because of this guy and what he did. This moment in history, this unknown guy we just plucked and gave this assignment to. One is that I think across the world, it was a really terrifying and comprehensible event. It was hard to imagine what had happened, right? I think the dogs gave something for people to kind of connect with, comforting.
Mhm.
Um, and I know it meant a lot to the firefighters there. It's like just to come and have the dogs happy to see him. So that was one good thing that he did. But the other thing he did was he educated people about the whole search and rescue structure and the systems and the teams, because his philosophy was that dogs aren't the team, the dogs are part of the team. So
Mm.
use the opportunity of the dogs to teach people about the search teams. And so that generated more community funding and support and local funding support. And so when the teams went back home, they were stronger than they ever been before. And now historically, they're stronger than they ever before because of the opportunity to educate from 9/11. They've saved thousands of lives, tens of thousands of lives all over the world
Mm.
since then. So that's the second thing he helped do. And then the third and last thing he do, um, is I talked to people at the 9/11 Memorial Museum. Talked to the American Kennel Society, and they said, you know what, the publicity that Doug generated for the search dogs in 9/11, they go, that was really a triggering event in the whole world recognizing the value of dogs
Mm.
as at schools, at nursing homes, at hospitals, and the whole idea of therapy dogs, which we see all the time now, that all originated from the publicity of the search dogs at 9/11. So this one
Interesting.
guy in his job at 9/11, not only to contribute to that disaster, not only did contribute to the search and rescue system, but he's made this worldwide impact in the use of therapy dogs that continues to stay. And he passed away a few years ago.
I was just seeing that. I was reading about him, actually, an article that it was like either you authored or a significant
Yeah.
part of, talking about just his job.
Yep. And so that was the inspiration for the title of my book, because it just crisis is opportunity, right?
Mm.
And just and you never know who's going to step up. It, so I just thought that really, but it's going to be people who have a set of core values and aren't afraid of situation.
It sounded like Ed also had something that I find to be more and more important the longer I go in business, which is just enthusiasm. Just like enthusiastic people who are willing to take on the challenge and aren't going to say, "Well, nah, I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound like I want to do that."
Guys, surround yourself with positive people, man. It just, yep.
One of our
Chase
core
up-
values,
chase up, man.
one of our core values, is be positive, but I'm like half tempted to just change it to enthusiasm, because I think positivity and enthusiasm are slightly different. Like, you can be positive but not energetic, but you can't be enthusiastic and not be positive and energetic. So
Mhm.
take
I
that.
like it. Yeah, I use enthusiasm a lot. I've been using that a lot too, because I think that captures it for me too.
Heck, if someone comes into your organization, or if you're like low level person just entering the workforce, like, what are the skills that I need to be successful, Alex? I would say just if you can just be enthusiastic every single day, that will carry you so far.
It really
Enthusiastic
will.
people are willing to learn, they're willing to be taught, they're willing to take on new projects, they're gonna be positive, they're not gonna get tired and fatigued and frustrated. It's really just gonna take you so far in life, just having that skill that you can choose to have. You can just choose to be like, "I'm excited I'm working here," it's
Yeah,
let's learn something new.
yeah, and it's just fun to be around people like that too, isn't it?
Absolutely. What about the, last handful of,
Oh yeah, yeah, right. So that's five. Six. I talk about the power of will,
mm,
um, and just that with if you have a vision, you have perseverance, and you're good at communicating things. God, you could really impact positive outcomes. This power of will. So seven is dealing with failure, facing failure,
mm,
how to overcome screw ups, setbacks, miscues. Eight is talk straight, so how to communicate.
mm,
And then nine is just the simple principle of following up. If you say you're going to do it, do it.
mm.
So many people say I'm dealing with United Airlines right now, customer service, and they keep saying they're going to call me back, and they never do.
Yeah.
Saying it is not the same as doing it. Yeah, do it. Sorry, I hope they're not a sponsor.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
love the airline, but
yeah.
right now they're frustrating me. And
Well,
then
that one seems so easy, but we just get pulled in so many directions in life, and you say, "Yeah, yeah, I'll shoot you the email when this
I'll
podcast
shoot you the
will come
email.
out." And
Yeah.
then, 6 weeks go by when your episode's ready to go out, and, Steve's releasing it. I don't know, that Tuesday's gonna be really busy for me.
Yeah.
Don't do it. It's easy to do, but
Easy to do. Yeah. So that's it. So I make that a principal follow up. And then the last one, which we already talked about, is come home.
mm,
Come home. Take care. Yeah. Yeah. Come home and refresh, replenish, re energize, reflect, reconnect, and then go do it again.
it's certainly not as serious in the business world, but I see that over and over again. A lot of people cannot, like, detach themselves from their business.
Hmm.
And I've had individuals on the podcast who are kind of experts in rest. I had an individual on named Alex Pong, and he wrote a book called Rest, but then he wrote another book called The 4-Day Work Week. And specifically in Rest, he talked about all of the historic scientists and engineers and thinkers and kind of what their daily routines looked like. And they were not in the lab for 12, 16 hours a day, 305 days a year. They kind of knew that, hey, you need to like take some time off. So they would work for 3 or 4 hours in the morning, 7 o'clock to 11. And then at 11, they'd go eat lunch, and then they'd take a 2 or 3 hour nap or a walk. I think Winston Churchill was a famous napper. He would like nap in a bunker or like a bank vault or something like that during.
Yeah. He would nap in the afternoon.
Yeah. And then they come back to work. And most of their great intuitions or discoveries were not when they were sitting at the lab bench. It was when they were on a walk 2 or 3 hours away from doing what they actually needed to do. So I think as a business owner, this idea that I'm just going to get in there and I'm going to grind, I don't think that's the way to do it. I'm personally of the opinion, like, relax, take your mind off of it, go for a walk, do something different. That's going to be more effective and allow you, like you said, to not burn out in your career. It's cool if you do 2 years and burn out, but dude, I'm going to beat you if I can do it at a steady state for 15 years.
I agree.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for your time today, brother. It was a fun conversation. Tell people where they can find some of your stuff. Your book is on Amazon. It has 0.9 stars, 91% positive ratings. That is very good. We're in the Amazon business, so 4.9 is about as high as you can get. And I see Kindle, hardcover, and paperback. No Audible version out there?
No audio version. I need to do it sometime, but I might wait for my next book, Alex, and then do that audio and roll it all out together.
You got a voice for it, man. I would listen. I would listen to
that. Yeah, really. I was thinking hard, so maybe I'll do it.
Do it, man. Nobody's gonna be able to read it quite like you do.
But hey, I appreciate you, Alex.
Absolutely.
Man, it's really been fun. Thank you.
Super fun. Your website, edwardconley.com.
Yep.
Awesome, Ed. Thank you. Have a great rest of your Saturday, man.
Okay, you too. Thank you. See ya.
Appreciate you.